Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
The decision to leave the office was a small act of rebellion, a quiet mutiny against the tyranny of the billable hour. It was just past noon, and the stack of contracts on my desk seemed to be breathing. Each clause, each subsection, felt like a link in a chain holding me to my leather chair. I'm Elias Vance, and I'm a lawyer. My life is built on logic, on precedent, on the cold, hard structure of the law. But on that Tuesday, my structure was cracking. I needed a break. I needed air that wasn't filtered through a corporate HVAC system. I told my assistant I was stepping out for lunch, something I rarely did. Usually, it was a sad sandwich hunched over my keyboard. Today, I craved anonymity. I craved pasta from Giovanni's, a small, family-run Italian place that felt like a relic from a simpler time. It was the kind of place you could disappear into, surrounded by the comforting din of families and the smell of garlic and simmering tomatoes. The bell above the door chimed a welcome as I stepped inside. The familiar warmth enveloped me. I walked past the red checkered tablecloths, my eyes scanning for an empty two-top. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a phantom limb of the office I was trying to escape. I ignored it, walking to the counter to place my usual order, linguine with clam sauce. As I waited, I leaned against the counter, scrolling idly through emails, a habit I couldn't seem to break. "Your order will be ready in 10 minutes, Mr. Vance," the young woman behind the counter said with a smile. I nodded, pocketing my phone. My gaze drifted across the room, a lazy, unfocused sweep. It was a painter's exercise, observing light and shadow, the gestures of strangers. A family with 2 boisterous children in one booth. A pair of elderly men debating over a chessboard in another. And then, my eyes snagged on a corner booth, partially obscured by a decorative wooden partition. My breath caught. It was a flicker of recognition, the kind that makes your brain work a fraction faster than your heart. A woman was laughing, her head tilted back, her smile so wide and genuine it lit up the dim corner. The light from the window caught the side of her face, and the flicker of recognition solidified into a certainty that felt like a punch to the gut. It was Serena Hayes, my sister-in-law, my wife Vivian's younger sister. She was leaning into the man beside her, her eyes locked on his. He was well-dressed, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh again, a private, intimate sound that didn't belong in the public space of a restaurant. A frown creased my brow. Serena was married to Noah Sterling, my best friend since our dorm rooms felt like palaces, my partner at the law firm, the man who was closer to me than my own brother. Where was Noah? The man beside her turned his head slightly, catching the light. My blood ran cold, the air in my lungs turned to ice. It was Landon Thorne, a local real estate magnate, a man whose public image was meticulously crafted. Good father, exemplary husband, a pillar of the community, his face plastered on charity gala invitations and political campaign flyers. He was, above all else, famously married to a woman who was not Serena. My legal mind scrambled for a rational explanation, a business lunch, a professional meeting. But the evidence contradicted the theory. They weren't sitting opposite each other like colleagues, they were pressed together side by side in the booth. Their bodies were angled inward, creating a bubble of intimacy that excluded the rest of the world. He ran a hand casually along her bare arm, and her own hand drifted down, resting for a moment on his thigh beneath the table. The smiles weren't polite, they were conspiratorial. The glances weren't fleeting, they lingered with a weight that spoke of shared secrets. This wasn't a business lunch. This wasn't professional courtesy. This was a rendezvous. This was a betrayal. My heart began to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of discovery and dread. This was infidelity, clear as day. My first instinct was primal, a surge of loyalty to the man I called my brother. I had to tell Noah. The thought was immediate, an undeniable moral imperative. He deserved to know. He was living a lie, and I was now the unwilling keeper of the devastating truth that would shatter it. But as I stood there, frozen near the counter, a colder, more lawyerly part of my brain kicked in. Is this your business, Vance? Are you sure you know the whole story? Intervening could unleash a hurricane, destroying 2 families, tearing apart the comfortable fabric of our interconnected lives. The more I watched, however, the more the colder voice was silenced. The ease between them, the practiced intimacy, the way Landon's hand found hers as if it had done so 1,000 times before. This wasn't a one-time slip. This was a routine. There was a history there, etched into their shared smiles and secret touches. I couldn't know how long it had been going on, but the betrayal was deep, and it was against Noah, a man who trusted me with his career, his secrets, his life. That trust was a sacred pact, and this secret felt like poison. That's what made me reach for my phone. My hand was shaking slightly as I pulled it from my pocket. My thumb slid across the screen, the cool glass a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. I found Noah's name in my contacts, the photo of him, and me grinning on a fishing trip years ago mocking me. I pressed the call button. The phone rang in my ear once, twice. My eyes remained fixed on the corner booth, a spectator to a play I never wanted to see. I shifted my weight, trying to make myself smaller, less conspicuous. Suddenly, the conversation between Serena and Landon was interrupted. A third person approached their table. My eyes widened. A wave of nausea washed over me, so potent I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. It felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me, leaving me in a freefall of disbelief. It was Vivian, my wife. She appeared smiling, gliding toward their table as if arriving at a prearranged meeting. There was no surprise on her face, only a warm, familiar greeting. She leaned down and gave Landon a kiss on the cheek, a friendly, social kiss that now looked utterly obscene. She embraced her sister, Serena, with a tight, reassuring hug. Then she slid into the booth beside them, completing the tableau of deceit. 3 people now shared the table of betrayal. 3 people I knew intimately. 3 people weaving a web of lies. The call to Noah went to voicemail. I didn't bother calling back. The betrayal I felt a moment ago was a shallow cut compared to this gaping wound. Vivian, my Vivian. She didn't just know about her sister's affair. She was an active participant in the charade. There she was, laughing, pouring a glass of wine from the bottle on the table, her presence lending an air of normalcy to the whole sordid affair. She was the cover, the alibi. Why? Why would she do this? We had built our marriage, our family, on a foundation of honesty. It was the one value we championed above all else. The lesson we drilled into our children, Finn and Chloe, honesty, even when it's hard. And now, here she was, smiling, complicit, tangled in a lie so profound it made my head spin. I didn't approach them. I couldn't. Instead, I took a step back, melting into the shadows near the entrance where I could watch without being seen. My hand, still holding my phone, rose almost of its own accord. I opened the camera app. My finger tapped the record button. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe it was the lawyer in me, the instinct to preserve evidence. Maybe it was desperation, a need for tangible proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Or maybe it was a dark, unbidden need to capture the exact moment my world fractured. I filmed Landon's hand brushing a stray strand of hair from Serena's face. I recorded Vivian glancing around the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room with a casualness that was too deliberate, checking to make sure their secret was safe. I captured the silent toast they shared, their glasses clinking together, their smiles full of things I would never know. I left the restaurant without my lunch, my appetite a distant memory, my stomach churned with a toxic mix of anger and sorrow. I drove not home, not back to the office, but to a distant parking lot overlooking the city. I sat there alone in the sterile silence of my car, the video on my phone, a ghost waiting to be unleashed. The pain wasn't just from Serena's betrayal or Landon's hypocrisy. It came from Vivian's silence, from the fact that she had hidden this from me, that she had left the house that morning telling me she was going to visit her mother, when in reality, she was heading to a clandestine meeting with an adulteress and a married man. It came from the shattered trust, the rupture of the unspoken pact between a husband and wife, the pact of truth. The drive back to the office was a blur. The city's familiar streets felt alien, as if I were seeing them through a distorted lens. The documents on my desk might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Every time I blinked, I saw the scene in the restaurant. Vivian's smile, Serena's laugh, Landon's proprietary touch. The complicity, the sheer, breathtaking depth of the deception. My head felt heavy, my body leaden with a grief I couldn't yet name. I locked myself in my office, the video looping in my mind. The unspoken pact between Vivian and me, the one built over nearly 2 decades of shared dreams and struggles, was now in pieces. Had she done this before? What other secrets was she keeping? The questions were a hammer inside my skull, pounding away at the foundations of my life. I heard the door to Noah's office slam shut down the hall, the sound jolting me from my stupor. He was back from his meeting. I couldn't delay any longer. The truth, however ugly, demanded to be spoken. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked the few steps to his office, my heart a heavy stone in my chest. I had the video queued up on my phone, ready. Before he could even ask about my day or launch into a story about his meeting, I held up a hand. Noah, sit down. We need to talk. My tone must have conveyed the gravity. He stopped, his cheerful demeanor fading. He sank into the chair opposite his desk, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Elias? What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost. I took a deep breath, the air burning in my lungs. I placed my phone on the desk between us but didn't play the video yet. The words had to come first. I was having lunch at Giovanni's, I began, my voice firm, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I saw something I can't ignore, something you need to know. I told him everything, clearly, without embellishment. I described the scene, the touches, the smiles. I tried to maintain my composure as I watched his face cycle through a storm of emotions, confusion, denial, and finally, a dawning, sickening understanding. He sat silently for a few long seconds after I finished, just listening, processing. The silence in the room was absolute. "Who was the man?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The name felt like a curse on my tongue. Landon Thorne. Noah's eyes widened. Anger didn't come right away. First came a heavy, disbelieving stillness. He shook his head slowly, as if trying to physically dislodge the information from his brain. "Number not Landon. There has to be a mistake." "There's no mistake, Noah." "Show me," he said, his voice now hard as steel. "Show me the video." I slid the phone across the polished surface of the desk. He picked it up. His knuckles were white as he gripped the device. I watched his face as the silent film played. The intimate smiles. The complicity, the betrayal, captured in crystal clear high definition. When the short clip ended, he didn't say a word. He just placed the phone back on the desk, his movements stiff and deliberate. Then he stood up. "I have to go," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It was a terrifying calm, the eerie quiet before a storm. "Noah, wait," I said, rising from my chair. "You're too shaken up. Don't do anything rash. Let's think this through." But he was already moving, grabbing his keys and wallet. There was no reasoning with him. His eyes were fixed on some distant point, his mind already made up. He was a man walking toward a cliff, and nothing I could say would stop him. I followed him out, a helpless spectator to the impending disaster I had set in motion. I didn't know for sure where he was going, but I had a sinking feeling. I got in my car and drove towards Giovanni's, keeping a safe distance behind him. My hands gripped the steering wheel, a sense of dread coiling in my stomach. When I arrived, the chaos had already erupted. I saw it through the large front window before I even got out of the car. Noah was there. He had seen it with his own eyes. Serena and Landon, still in their booth, still wrapped in their bubble of lies. Vivian, I noticed with a pang of something too complicated to name, was gone. Noah's reaction had been immediate. There was no shouting match, no tearful confrontation, just pure, unadulterated rage. He had lunged at Landon, pulling him from the booth. The punch he threw was direct and brutal. Landon crumpled, falling from his chair and landing in a heap on the floor. The restaurant exploded. People screamed. Dishes shattered. Serena was on her feet, trying to intervene. But Noah pushed her away firmly, his face a mask of fury and pain. Restaurant staff rushed forward, and someone shouted that they were calling security. Customers scrambled to get out of the way, their phones held high, filming the ugly spectacle. Noah didn't run. He didn't hide. Amid the chaos, he stood his ground. He pulled out his own phone. I had sent him the video file, and showed it to the security guard who arrived, his voice loud and clear, justifying his actions. He stated exactly what was happening, and why he had reacted that way. Landon, trying to pull himself together, attempted a denial, but his carefully constructed image crumbled in the face of the digital evidence being broadcast to a room full of strangers. Noah finally turned and walked out of the restaurant, shouldering his way through the crowd. He walked past my car without seeing me, his face a devastating mixture of anger, shame, and unbearable pain. He had defended his honor, but at what cost? And I, who had mustered the courage to tell the truth, knew that this violent, public moment was not an ending. It was the beginning of a rupture, not just in my best friend's marriage, but in my own home. Because now the truth was exposed, and with it, everything and everyone that had been hidden for so long. That night, the silence in our house was a physical presence. It was heavy, suffocating. It filled the spaces between the floorboards and clung to the curtains. Vivian walked in the door hours after I got home, her face pale. She had witnessed everything at the restaurant. She had seen Noah's explosion, seen Landon on the floor, seen the shock on her sister's face. And she had seen me, standing at a distance, my phone in my hand, the silent recorder of her deceit. She knew that I knew. There was no more pretending. I was waiting in the living room, sitting in the dark. I didn't turn on a light when she entered. I wanted her to feel the coldness, the emptiness that had taken over our home. She dropped her keys on the console table, the clatter unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Elias," she began, her voice trembling. "Don't," I said. The word was quiet but sharp as a shard of glass. She flinched. She tried anyway, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Things got out of control. I never imagined Noah would react that way. The plan was just to talk, to convince Serena to end it. I stood up, cutting her off with a gesture. The excuses were like static, meaningless noise. "I don't want excuses, Vivian. I want to know one thing. How long have you been lying to me?" The question hung in the air between us. She finally sank onto the sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. A few months, she whispered. She was unhappy. She told me she needed someone to talk to, that Landon was just an escape. She promised me it was just this one meeting, to say goodbye. Her words were confused, desperate, a tangled mess of half-truths and justifications. I just watched her, my face impassive. I didn't feel surprised. I just felt exhausted, a weariness so profound it settled deep in my bones. Why did you lie to me? I asked, my voice low. Why did you tell me you were visiting your mother? Why conceal the trip to the restaurant? Why involve yourself in something so dirty without even talking to me, your husband? I was afraid, she finally admitted, her voice cracking. I was afraid of disappointing you. I was afraid of destroying Serena's image, of starting a war between our families. I thought I could control it. I thought it would just be one conversation, and no one would ever find out. She knew how hollow it sounded. She knew it wasn't enough. I walked to the hallway, retrieved my phone from my coat pocket, and returned. I stood in front of her, the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. I hit play on the video. The sounds of the restaurant, the faint clinking of glasses, filled the silence. Her own laughter, light and carefree, echoed in our living room. She lowered her eyes, unable to watch the image of herself smiling complacently next to her sister and her lover. Seeing the complicity captured in those few damning minutes was more painful than she had imagined. Please, Elias, she begged, tears now streaming down her face. Delete it, please. It will only bring more suffering. No, I said, my voice cold. This video is the only true thing amid so many lies. The conversation ended there. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, no drama. Just a cold, dead silence that was crueler than any argument. I turned and walked to the linen closet, pulled out a blanket and a pillow. I made a makeshift bed on the couch. I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. She remained on the sofa, staring into the void, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. Our marriage hadn't collapsed in a single day, but in that moment, it was clear that something fundamental had broken for good. We were still living under the same roof, but we were already living separate lives. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken words. I slept in the guest room. Our conversations became brief, mechanical transactions about bills and the kids' schedules. The warmth had been bled from our home, replaced by a chilling tension. The kids began to notice. Finn, our older son at 16, grew quiet and watchful, his eyes darting between Vivian and me at the dinner table. Chloe, our sensitive 12-year-old daughter, cried at the slightest thing. I tried to maintain the routine for them, but it was impossible to ignore the chasm that had opened between their parents. Meals were silent affairs. Our eyes avoided meeting across the table. At the office, Noah was a ghost. He took time off, saying he had things to sort out at home. He avoided my calls. I respected his need for space, but I felt myself growing more distant from everything and everyone I held dear. One night, I came home late from work to find Vivian waiting for me in the living room. Her face was drawn, her eyes puffy. I talked to Serena, she said quietly. She confessed everything to Noah. He's forgiven her. They're trying to rebuild. I listened with my stomach turning. I thought about how different things could have been if Vivian had been honest from the start, but she chose secrecy. She chose to protect a lie instead of trusting her husband, and now she stood there, expecting some kind of understanding, as if everything could be fixed. I just nodded and walked past her to the guest room. The breaking point didn't come from me, however. It came from our children. Finn had noticed the strange atmosphere long before any explanation came. The easy chatter at meals had vanished. One night, while I was finishing my coffee in the kitchen, he approached me, his young face etched with worry. Dad, he asked directly, what's going on with you and Mom? I didn't have the heart to lie to him. He was old enough to handle the truth, and he deserved it more than anyone. I sat him down and explained as gently as I could that Serena had gotten involved with another man, and that his mother knew about it and had hidden it. I told him about the restaurant, the video, Noah's reaction, and how everything had fallen apart. He listened silently, his expression growing serious, his eyes watery. When I finished, he just nodded. I get why you're hurt, he said, his voice thick with an emotion that sounded eerily like my own. I feel betrayed, too. I asked him to be discreet, to let me handle it with Chloe. But he had already decided his sister needed to know. The truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. The next morning, at breakfast, the fragile peace we had maintained was shattered. Chloe, who had been pushing her cereal around her bowl, suddenly dropped her spoon with a clatter. I think what Mom did was disgusting, she said quietly, her voice trembling but clear. Vivian, who had been trying to act as if our world hadn't collapsed, froze. She looked at her daughter, her face a mask of shock and pain. Chloe looked directly at her mother, her young eyes filled with a wisdom and judgment that was devastating. I don't understand, she said, her voice rising. How can a mother who always talks about respect and trust and family hide an affair like that? Why did you defend Aunt Serena's betrayal? Why did you lie to all of us while pretending to be the example at home? Vivian tried to speak, but no words came out. Finn stepped in, his voice firm. I already talked to Dad, Mom. I know about the recording. I'm so disappointed. The worst part is realizing you chose silence when you could have prevented all of this. No. Vivian took a deep, shuddering breath. The judgment from her own children had finally broken through her defenses. I made a mistake, she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. I thought I was protecting my sister, but now I see I just destroyed the trust inside my own home. She couldn't stay. After that breakfast, Vivian left without saying where she was going. The truth, spoken through the unfiltered honesty of her children, had finally shown her the true cost of her silence. Vivian spent the day in silence, her phone turned off. As she would later tell me, she drove to Serena's house. She found her sister alone, her eyes swollen from crying. Serena confirmed what Vivian had told me. Noah had chosen to forgive her. He had chosen to try to rebuild their relationship. How is that possible? Vivian had asked, shocked. After everything? He said he'd rather face the pain of the truth than live a life built on lies, Serena replied. That phrase echoed in Vivian's mind for hours. The pain of the truth. She realized that in her attempt to shield her sister from that pain, she had inflicted a deeper, more insidious wound on her own family. She had lost what mattered most, the trust of her husband and her children. She had made excuses, manipulated situations, all to avoid confrontation. Now, with her own marriage in ruins, she felt it might be too late to fix things. The next morning, she stayed alone in her room for over an hour. She reread old messages between us, looked at family photos, watched simple videos of happier times, birthdays, vacations, lazy Sunday afternoons. She was trying to find the strength in memories that now felt like they belonged to someone else. She decided she needed to act differently. Avoiding pain was no longer an option. It was time to face it head on. She walked downstairs without a word and left again. She came back hours later. I was in the living room with the kids when she returned in the late afternoon. She had asked them to wait there with me. When she appeared in the doorway, she looked tired, fragile, but resolute. She was holding a bouquet of stargazy lilies, the kind I always brought her on our anniversary. She was wearing a light blue dress, the same one she had worn the day I proposed to her on a windy cliff overlooking the ocean. The symbolic weight of the gestures was immense, a desperate plea, spoken without words. No one spoke. Then, she did something that stunned us all into silence. She knelt on the floor in front of me and our children. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held my gaze. I don't expect to be forgiven, she said, her voice raw and shaking. I deserve the pain that I'm feeling. I failed everyone, especially myself. She took a breath. Betrayal isn't just sleeping with someone else, Elias. Betrayal exists in silence, in complicity, in cowardice. I apologize for lying, for thinking I was protecting someone when, in reality, I was just running away from the truth. I have no pride left. Shame has taken its place, and I am only here, on my knees, because I still love this family more than anything else in the world. Finn looked at me, his eyes wide. Chloe was crying silently, and she reached out to take her mother's hand. I stood there for a long time, the silence stretching on. I looked at my children's faces, at the woman I had loved for 2 decades kneeling on our floor in an act of utter surrender. I thought about the advice I gave to clients in messy divorces. I had always said that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to start over, even when the wounds are still open. I didn't answer her right then. I didn't say, I forgive you. The words would have been a lie. But I bent down, picked up the flowers she had left on the floor, and placed them in a vase on the table. Let's have dinner together tonight, I said, my voice quiet but steady. All of us. Dinner was simple. It was quiet, but for the first time in days, there was something in the air that felt like hope. The road ahead would be long, filled with difficult conversations and lingering distrust. The cracks in our foundation were deep, and I didn't know if they could ever be fully repaired. But there, in the fragile quiet of our shared meal, was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is all you have to rebuild a world.